A gamble. Hello! Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Fantasy Grounds Fridays. Today, I am joined by special guest Robert Adduci, and I mean your list of credits is kind of a lengthy one, so I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. So I've been a gamer for, I don't know, 30 something years. And then for about the past 10 years, been kind of working in the industry. Got started with doing some writing for the Ashes of Athos campaign. And then doing social media for some small Kickstarters, and then kind of just grew into kind of doing social media and writing and community management for different companies. So that's kind of what I've been doing for more or less for the past 10 years, one of which was Fantasy Ground.
Yeah. That is, in fact, how I first heard about you was doing stuff here for us. So, also, like, welcome onto the show. It's good to talk to you today.
Thanks. I don't think I've been on before. Yeah.
So I guess just first, just kind of basic like intro questions is, what got you into role-playing games? What led to this moment right now?
I remember before I even knew what that D&D like was a thing, I was in like 8th grade, and I live originally from Arizona, in Phoenix, and so it was the summer and it was hot. Nobody wanted to go outside, and so one of my friends' cousin was like, "Hey, I'll tell you a story. You guys can just tell me what you want to do, and we'll go through it." And so like that was really my introduction. Like, didn't have dice or anything. It was just storytelling. And then I must have played some video games or something that were similar, like Bard's Tale. I remember Bard's Tale. I used to play that game, and so I think a friend of mine and I just kind of like made a bunch of equipment cards and monster cards on like 3x5 cards, and like just made up a game sort of. And then eventually, a couple weeks later, someone was like, "Hey, that's like D&D," and we're like, what is this?" And so and so that was sort of the beginning in like freshman year. Yeah.
That's really cool. So you are the second or third person to come on and say that you essentially made up Dungeons and Dragons before knowing what it was, and that is honestly that's my favorite like thing to hear. That is just such a cool thing that people do when they create their own RPG before even knowing what an RPG is.
Yeah. It was fun.
And I think that really like leads to like becoming a game designer or a writer for those types of games later on in life is doing that.
Yeah. And even though like I'm kind of like a forever GM now, back in high school, I think I was super lucky because all of my friends, like once our kind of core group kind of gelled, each of us sort of took turns running games, and like everybody like picked their their setting that they love to run for D&D, but we played tons of other games too. And so like I picked Dark Sun, another friend picked
I was just gonna ask what was your
everything.
setting of choice, but I probably could have guessed that it would be Dark Sun.
Yeah. So again, I'm from Phoenix, and so playing sort of regular D&D and Lord of the Rings and whatnot, kind of seeing all that stuff. It's like forests and all this stuff, and it's like, well, I don't really know forests that well, like swamps and lakes. I don't know that stuff either.
You mean desert?
Right. Yes, exactly. And so when in 1990 or 1991, whenever those first ads in Dragon magazine came out for Dark Sun, I was like, oh, it's a desert. I know a desert. And so since that's about when I really started to GM, I was just like, I'll pick this one up, and I've just loved it ever since.
And yeah, Drake Takes Dark Sun was second edition.
Mm-hmm.
That is when it started. That's actually when like I guess like some of those like main like big campaign settings started earlier than that, but a lot of them really got like fully kicked off with box sets and all that in second edition.
Right. For first edition, you had like Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and like amazingly Spelljammer was also one of the early ones. So, but
it's funny that it then like went away for so long.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess my next is and you kind of partially went over it, but what was it about Dark Sun? Like, why was that? Besides the obvious of you understood the setting being a desert.
Yeah. So just really everything about the setting I love. So the whole like ecological disaster thing, you know, you think we'd have been over it by now, but nope, we're still here. And so, but we
Still
were talking
relevant.
about that. Yeah, we were talking about that in the 90s, the same kind of thing. And so I really like that aspect of it. I love psionics. I'm not sure if it really gave me a love for psionics or like I liked it before. I can't remember, but I love psionics. I love the defiling magic. I love just sort of like throwing everything, all the kind of classic fantasy tropes on its head. Um, I think all of those things, just made it interesting to me. And then you have, of course, like we were just talking about the desert. So in most games, like each biome is like one thing, right? You got your deserts, your forests, your whatever. In Dark Sun, there's like 8 different kinds of desert, and so it's kind of interesting um, to have these sort of different biomes. And like being from Arizona, like it's like, oh, I recognize all of those, all of those different kinds of desert, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, when you live in the desert, you really realize that there's a lot more than just sand dunes.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of fun that you're from Arizona. I'm from Utah, so
Okay.
we're also a desert, but we're
Yep.
not nearly as deserty as Arizona is. So, but I
Right.
feel
Yep.
that.
Hmm. Yeah, you've got
Um,
some a little higher over there.
yeah, yeah, a little higher elevation. So we do have some
Hmm.
forests too. But what is your since you mentioned the different like desert biomes, what is your favorite desert?
Um,
Your favorite desert
I
in Dark Sun specifically?
so in Dark Sun specifically, the Rocky Badlands. And so that kind of translates to sort of canyons, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
canyons here in Arizona. I know there's a ton in Utah too. And so I love personally being like in canyons, because when there are like flash floods and things like that, it brings stuff from all over the place. So you always find interesting things while you're in canyons. I actually have a flash flood story of a canyon. We were like hiking down a canyon, and we saw that there was dark clouds, but they were like far, far north. And so we thought we were good, but then literally a flash flood kind of came upon us uh, within minutes, and we had to like run to the edge of the canyon and climb up like halfway up the canyon to get out of the way of the flood. It was pretty scary, but also pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and right there, that was a Dungeons and Dragons moment right there. That is exactly what
Right?
could
Totally.
happen in a game of Dark Sun or any other Dungeons and Dragons.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Um. All right. I think before we move on, from Dark Sun entirely, I just wanted to get, because I know a lot of people love Dark Sun. I just
Hmm.
wanted to get like your opinion on Watsy basically saying that there will not be a new Dark
Hmm.
Sun. Do you feel like would you like to see a new Dark Sun?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a new Dark Sun, and primarily because it would bring new players in. I mean, there are new players coming in, but still, it would bring more. It'd bring a
Mm-hmm.
bunch. And so, some people are like, oh, they're not going to do it the same. It's like, well, nothing is ever done the same. So, I was sort of not really cool with some of the changes they made for fourth edition at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
I've grown to love most of them. And so, I just want more fans, more people to play with, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but I understand where they're coming from. Like they're sort of, worried that they're going to get roasted for old stuff, even though, I feel like that sort of slavery is, because that's the
I
big
mean
thing that
that's
people talk
that's
about.
the big elephant in the room with Dark
Right.
Sun.
Right. And that sort of slavery is like really all over the place. I mean, it's in Star Wars. It's in,
Mm-hmm.
most it's
Yeah,
in Forgotten
lots
Realms.
of
It's like all
fantasy.
over the place. So it's just a little bit more front and center. And you will get those people that like want to, come up with the prices for slaves and like role play some of that. And like if people want to do that, whatever. But like I don't have a need to do that. And like
Yeah.
I've always shown slavery as like a negative thing. Like
Yeah.
it's never something the players do or the heroes do. So it's always something to overcome.
Yeah, and obviously, like that is the main reason. I do wonder if another reason for not wanting to do it is Dark Sun is probably out of like those original campaign settings, maybe Spelljammer aside, it is easily the most different.
Hmm. I mean, I would think that that's a plus, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'm super stoked to see what they do with Planescape because Planescape is another one that I
Mhm.
love, and just the aesthetics of Planescape have always been so different. You know, it's mostly city-based stuff, or the planes, of course, but still.
Yeah. Let's move into talking about some of the writing you've done.
Sure.
Yeah. So I know you just mentioned that you have been working with AAW on their mini dungeon tomes Kickstarter.
Hmm.
But and we'll get to that. But I just wanted to like get what's a brief overview of like some of the stuff you've worked on.
Sure. So, like I said, I sort of started professionally with Ashes of Athos, which was the fourth edition um, organized play for
Mm-hmm.
Dark Sun. One of my old friends, Alpha Stream, was one of the admins for that, and I had kind of been out of D&D for a while, and then heard that Dark Sun was coming back for fourth edition, so I kind of came back and started talking to some old friends, and he was telling me about the Ashes of Ashes that they were starting, and so I asked to kind of like start editing some of their stuff, reviewing it, and then eventually got to edit it, and then eventually kind of got to write some, which was cool. Um, so that was like the first thing I wrote, although that was still, it was still volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of led to a bunch of opportunities. Um, and ultimately, I started writing or started working for Wizards of the Coast as part of the D&D Adventures League, which was like the start of fifth edition's organized play. And from there, I was able to write. I don't know. I've wrote probably a dozen or dozen and a half adventures for Adventures League. So everything from kind of low level stuff up to tier 4 stuff, which was always interesting to write.
Yeah.
um, uh, and then I've written for, let's see, I've written for Shout of the Demon Lord. I've written some vampire stuff. I've written Esper Genesis. I wrote some Wrath and Glory, a couple things here and there. Yeah, so I've written a couple things here and there.
Yeah. That's a pretty big list of stuff you've been uh working on. I've got two questions in my head. I'm trying to figure out which order they work best in. I think because you mentioned the tier 1 through tier 4, what is your favorite
Yeah.
level range to like write adventures for? What do you feel like gives you the most creativity?
I mean, tier 4 is definitely going to be like the most creativity because you don't have to like worry about like how are they going to get from A to B or how are they going to deal with this. Like you don't really know. So like because those characters are so powerful, you just sort of assume that they can overcome kind of some major
Mm-hmm.
issues. And so with lower level uh, adventures, I kind of feel like you have to sort of have a way that they can get out of it or overcome this thing. And as long as you have a couple of ways to do that, then you're okay. But whereas with higher tier stuff, like they're gonna be able to. It's just like how you're gonna be surprised as the
Mm-hmm.
GM how they overcome stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that. I had that exact moment while prepping my game that goes later tonight. I was like looking through the adventure. It's one of the Keys from the Golden Vault adventures, and I was like, "How are the
Hmm.
players supposed to do this? It doesn't say anywhere." And then I remembered, oh yeah, this is a level 8 adventure. They have
Yeah, they've
access
got
to
some
all kinds
resources.
of
Yeah.
spells, so like it doesn't matter. They'll figure it out.
Yep.
And then next, do you have a system that you lean towards in writing? Like, what system gives you the most freedom in writing?
Like game system.
Yeah, game system.
I mean, I've just written so many D&D adventures. That's kind of the easiest. But um, the sort of system that I've written an adventure for that was sort of just the easiest was probably Shout of the Demon Lord. Just because those adventures, what he did a lot, Rob, was
Mm-hmm.
kind of write one page adventures or two-page adventures, and so you don't have to put down the level of detail that you do in like a published D&D adventure. So even like the Adventures League stuff, like a 4-hour adventure is like 10,000 words.
Yeah,
And so that's a lot of details you got to put in there. Whereas again, some of Rob's adventures are like 2 pages, so
yeah.
just
Also,
makes it easy.
like I've never run a quote unquote 4 hour Adventurers League adventure that actually went 4 hours.
Oh, really? Like we used to have trouble, especially in playtests, because a lot of D&D Adventures League, like in public, you have like 6 people,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah.
we always found that the games ran long. But yeah, if you have only 4 people, then yeah, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I've never. No, I meant the opposite. I've never had one that lasted 4 hours or less. It's always
Oh
closer to
yeah,
6. I've always had to break them into two parts.
yep. Yeah. That's definitely again one of the issues we had was just making sure that they are short enough that you can squeeze them in, and then telling people like how like oh you can skip this adventure or whatever or
Hmm.
skip this encounter. One of the adventures that I wrote, the first tier 4 adventure I wrote, uh not only is it tier 4, which makes it kind of difficult to write for, but also it was only a 2-hour adventure, and so it was
Okay.
super hard, right? And in playtesting it, the
Which
final
one was this, or at least like what like?
so it was season 5. Oh yeah, Vault, Crypt of the Death Giants, Vault of the Death Giants. I think
Okay.
Crypt. Um, and the last fight in that, the first time I playtested it, just the last fight took us 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, okay, I got to
What?
change some things.
And that's where you start running into issues when you get like a time that is an
Hmm.
adventure is supposed to take. Is
Yep. Yep.
combat could be instant. The party can one round the boss, or
Hmm.
you'll be here all night.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yep. And that's something that's is hard sometimes, especially for that because like you know if for example one of the things in that adventure that people either loved or hated was there's like basically like a prismatic wall, sort of like a series of
Hmm.
walls, and people were either like that was easy or people were like that was impossible. So it's like, well, sorry, sorry, one or the
Yeah,
other.
it depends on the entire party's creativity.
Right. And it's difficult for when you're writing for organized play, like you have to write for everybody, whereas like if you're running a home game, you're like you can write to their specific
Hmm.
ability. Mhm.
Yeah, that's very true. Because Adventures League, you don't know the party makeup, and it's going to be run by thousands of people,
Right. Right.
millions even, and I'm sure in some cases there's a lot of people playing
Hmm.
Adventures League content even outside of the Adventures League itself.
For sure. For sure.
All right. How has using virtual tabletops changed your writing style over the past few years, if at all?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure if it has. Uh, well, actually, it's not sure. I guess there has been something. So I wrote what was called an author only adventure. So this was an adventure that only I was allowed to run as part of Adventures League.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way I first started to write the adventure, and the reason I first started to write it was because I had a whole bunch of dragon miniatures and stuff like that, but I never really ran a bunch of games with dragons. And so I was like, I'm going to use a bunch of these miniatures in this game. And so that's kind of what I started writing it towards. And so I just had these miniatures. That's what I wrote. But then the more I sort of play tested it and ran it, I did so online, and uh, using fantasy grounds. Like one of the things I was actually just talking about this in
Mm-hmm.
another Discord, but one of the things I love about fantasy grounds, especially like at high level, when you have a bunch of enemies and you've got a fireball or you've got dragon breath, you can just select all your enemies, run your saves and then throw the damage, and it just
Yeah.
automatically does it, which is awesome when you've got like 40 bad guys or when you've got whatever. um
Mm-hmm.
I just love that aspect. And so in that way, I sort of ended up finishing that adventure with a huge battle because I knew I could handle it with Fantasy Ground.
Yeah.
Um, and even when I had run that in person, I eventually started bringing Fantasy Grounds and using it on my laptop because it's so difficult to manage so many
Mm-hmm.
so many enemies and so many creatures in a battle.
Yeah. That honestly, that's my same like favorite part about fantasy grounds and virtual tabletops is being able to run much more intricate combats than you could
Hmm.
at a regular tabletop in-person game.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have I shared some screenshots of a Dark Sun adventure that I was running, and there's like all these canyons, and you've got this big Argosy, which is like this gigantic wagon,
Mhm.
and then I had like 80 Gith, which are like
Yeah.
common enemies in Dark Sun. I had like 80 of them out there, like literally 80 of them, and the players were like they were like 10th level or something, but they just like basically destroyed all of them because again they have a lot of a lot of resources at that level. But I took a screenshot of it and put it up, and people were like, "Wow, that's a huge combat."
Yeah, and that's something that like you would not run that
No,
with minis on an actual table.
yeah, right. You would just put like a bunch of big ones, say like these are mobs or whatever. But
Yeah,
you
you'd
didn't
be
have to
like,
do that because they could.
this mini represents 20 enemies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Drake takes ads from chat. Maps are more important to VTTs now. That is also kind of a thing, more so than the old Dryo race map boards.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Because they are sort of so easy to make nowadays, and there's just so many that you can just grab. So when I use Fantasy Grounds, I basically bought pretty much everything that Gabriel Picard has made. He's on Drive Through RPG. You can get all of his stuff. He's just got, like I've probably spent $1,000 to buy almost all of his stuff. I just love his style. And so since I've bought so much of it, kind of I can mesh things together, use things from one pack to another. And then when Fantasy Grounds kind of came out with the ability to kind of easily make maps.
I was just gonna ask if you've played around with the new-ish map making. It's not even new anymore. It came out last year, right? But it still feels new.
Yeah. So one of the things I was super excited to kind of play around with that stuff, and one of the reasons was in Dark Sun, the main city that one of my games is in, called Tier. So if you look at the old second edition Tier map, like none of the buildings are like square, right? Everything's kind of like Adobe and kind of these weird shapes. And so even the stuff that I love that Gabriel Pickard did of his like Adobe buildings, they were all square. And I was like, I want, to be able to draw whatever. And so once this the new Fantasy Grounds map stuff came out, I basically took Gabriel Pickard's walls and I basically made a brush for the walls.
Oh, yeah.
And basically could make them any shape I wanted, but they still look like, his style. And so that's been awesome. And then now that I can just kind of create, kind of buildings on the fly, if they're in a city, they can be in in a combat anywhere, and I can just kind of draw it out real fast. And it looks great. Like before used to be, you just use whatever assets you had, or, even on Fantasy Grounds, just draw on the map to kind of make something real quick. But now they can look good no matter where they're at.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's honestly like my favorite feature that I don't use nearly enough.
Yeah, it
I'm
was
really
hard
bad at it, to be honest.
It took me some time to just be like, okay, I'm just gonna sit down, I'm just gonna make some maps, just figure out what I'm doing, and then once you do that a couple times, then you're good to do it kind of live.
All right. So I know that it's been kind of a hot topic of discussion in the RPG universe for a little bit now, but I know that you've done some pro GMing. And I know that is kind of a thing that people have a lot of really strong opinions about.
For sure.
I feel like some of the negative opinions on it have like really gone down in the last like year or 2 years, but I just wanted to get your take on like pro GMing. Like, why do you do it? Why do you like doing it, and how does it different than say GMing for friends?
Sure. So I hadn't really thought about pro GMing until about 2017. I was doing Adventures League stuff, and again, we have, like I was talking about, those author only adventures where we could only the author could run those. And so what would happen was conventions would fly us out to the convention to run those adventures, right? And so that's great for everybody that lives in those cities with those conventions and that can afford to go to the convention, right?
Yeah, conventions aren't cheap,
right? But then I was like, well, what about, so it initially started from, what about all the people like overseas, like they're never, you can't really afford. Although, like I think Alan Patrick got flown out to New Zealand, I think, and I got flown out to Colombia actually
That's cool.
for a convention. So yeah, so aside from those couple of small things, um, in general, they're not able to run to play those games, and so I kind of, you know, uh, flew up the flag, and people were like, yeah, like you can do that. And so I started a Patreon is how I initially did it. And then I sort of learned like it wasn't just people overseas. There's lots of people that are, just in places where there aren't conventions, can't afford to go to conventions or whatever, but they can afford, 15 or 20 or $30 to play one of these games that they otherwise wouldn't be able to play. And so that's sort of how it initially started for me. And that was in like 27, 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for a long time. And then, so I had mostly like Adventures League players, but when I sort of stopped doing Adventures League stuff, I kind of moved over to just doing my own, Dark Sun stuff or Forgotten Realms, or like whatever, just running the hardcovers or just stuff I made up. And it is funny though, because I also run the big, it's like 180,000 people Facebook group. And like you said, like a few years ago, anytime somebody mentioned Pro GMs, people would be like, what the hell, this should be free.
I even remember like last year and 2021, like really recently, there was a lot of that where people were like, I mean, even getting into like publicly shaming people for paying for GMing. And honestly, that was crazy to me because my opinion of it, well, I mean, my job is live streaming. So
right.
I guess I've got no room to voice in on this, but like, why, if somebody can make a living or even just make any bit of money doing it, why not? Like, more power to them.
Yeah. So it's really funny because even in that group, like years ago, we had told people like, you can post about pro gaming if you want, but then people would always sort of like, talk it down, and then kind of went away with, obviously with COVID, everybody was online trying to find games. And then even recently, somebody was kind of getting down on somebody for pro gaming. And so it's still out there, but it's just one of those things. Like if you only view the game as like a hobby, then that's one thing. But like a lot of us are trying to make a living at this. And so, kind of we do whatever we can to kind of, do that so that we don't have to get a day job.
Yes, that is the goal. I mean, like I said, this is my day job, but like being able to do work with role-playing games is like the biggest dream come true for, I'm sure, you and me, and a lot of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I got derailed by looking over at chat. It's starting to move fairly quickly right now. Many new players don't realize the time and effort that goes into running a campaign. So
yeah, you kind of mentioned like what differences are there, and honestly, there's not, to me. Like I'm a pretty, so like when I'm writing my own stuff, I don't write like I don't write like I'm writing an Adventures League adventure. Like I just write notes, and so those whether I'm running in a pay to play game or a personal game, I pretty much run them the same. I use the same notes, I would do the same things. The only difference is I would say, like, I do feel a little bit more sort of, since I am using Fantasy Grounds, I'd always kind of try to have nice maps as much as possible. I really like the way like the top down miniatures look, and so I try to kind of mostly use those and stuff like that. So and then like I have Sirenscape and all that. So I kind of try to have a little bit more than just sort of like, what you would probably do if you're just playing with your friends that didn't want to invest a lot. And so, I tried to do that, but I mean, I enjoy all that stuff too. So it's not even really for the players so much as it's for me.
That's why I do it. I do it, even though like all of my games are streamed, like I get all of the fancy stuff because I like looking at it and hearing it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, DMs are a rare commodity at the moment. That makes it have value to players. Yes, exactly. And they are. I guess you know what. There's an excellent question for us to kind of both ponder. Why do you think that is? Why are DMs such a so hard to find currently?
I mean, I don't think it's currently. I think it's always been that way. But
I guess that's fair.
I think so. Over the years, different kind of organizations and stores and things like that have kind of tried to do, like rotating GMs or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, like if you have a table at a store and people are playing, maybe that GM doesn't want to run all the time. So then they would say, like, if you're going to play, like after you play so many sessions, you have to run a session. Well, that sounds good, but until you find out that most people don't have no interest in running.
Yeah.
And so then that kind of like breaks apart. And so kind of seeing that happen a bunch when I was helping with Adventures League kind of really made me realize that like not everybody is willing to put the time and effort in or is able to. And so so there's always going to be less GMs. Like I don't think it's that hard, and I think anybody could do it, but it does take some effort. And so there's just going to be some portion of people that are just unwilling to do it. And so I feel like there's always going to be GMs that are less GMs than players. And kind of talking about, I see a comment here that says, I've never seen anyone that enjoyed their paid experiences over non-paid. And again, I sort of run the same things. And so I could see why someone would do that. Like, what's so special? Well, not a whole lot, except for I'm going to be there most of the time. And I know I've been doing this for 30 years. I know how to tell a good story. I know the world, things like that. But also a lot of my players, like I have one group that was like 3 guys that used to play D&D together that wanted to play D&D together again, and they live all over the country. And so for that group, like they wouldn't be able to play, like they don't know anybody else that would run games.
Yeah.
And so I've been running them for like a year and a half now. And, those are, I really found that that those were sort of really the most people that are my clients. Kind of older people that used to play that want to play again, either with the same group or with different people. Maybe they just don't know anybody. So like when people used to like talk about advertising in the big D&D 5th edition group or in other places where gamers are a lot, I never used to do that because I always used to imagine that like all of those places, like people are on social media, they have friends that play D&D, so therefore they don't have to pay because they probably have a group that they can get into.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't have that, and so therefore paying is what's going to happen. Like no matter what you're doing, if you can't find anyone to do it with, but you really want to do it, you'll pay to do it. That's the way people are. So
yeah. Yeah. And I had one, but we're gonna take this one from chat before I lose it, which is as a forever DM, do you experience DM burnout, and how do you avoid that? Because that's the big question for all of us. I'm sure we all face that.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one of my longtime players, Hayden Hakel. But sometimes it happens. There's, I try to avoid it by kind of taking in a lot of content. So like watching movies and reading books and things like that. And so that's kind of what recharges me. But sometimes you can't do that, or sometimes even doing that doesn't sort of recharge you. And I do occasionally just say, I'm not into it tonight. I can't run tonight, like whatever. And I've never had, because all of my groups are like really long time, they're long-term groups.
Yeah.
It's never like, oh, like I took, Saturday off of work to play this game or anything like that. And so, it's more just like, if you're sick or whatever, no problem. And so, I could imagine, if I was running one shots though, unless I was like deathly ill that I couldn't run the game, I would definitely run the game. So, as far as DM burnout, just keeping yourself kind of healthy, getting enough sleep, all that stuff to kind of make sure that you can kind of do your job.
Yeah. Keep yourself healthy and keep your mental health good too. Like if you do start feeling that burnout, it is okay to skip a session if you have to.
Yeah, totally.
Just make sure you communicate with your players. Nothing is worse than it being like 2
Right.
minutes before.
Yep, yep. I mean, even like last week, so I'd gone on uh this cruise, this gaming cruise,
Mm-hmm.
and when I got back, I was supposed to run a game, and I was like, "Hey guys, I think I got the corona," which I did on the plane ride home, unfortunately, and so it was the first time I got it. So like I had to cancel. I had like 3 games that week, and I had to cancel all of them, which sucked. But
Yeah. I'm going to put a pin in that because I actually want to talk about that in a moment. I think it's really funny. I didn't know that you had done stuff for that, but like last week, one of my players like sent me like the news video about it and was like, "Did you know this exists?" So
Yeah.
I just think it's really funny that now this week I'm talking to you and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. I want to
Nice.
put a pin in that because there was one more that I wanted to ask about pro GMing before we transitioning into the ultimate paid GMing, which is an entire entire D&D cruise.
Yeah.
But that is, what advice do you have for any DMs looking to get into pro DMing?
I think my biggest advice would be just to, listen to your players. Now session zeros are sort of like a common thing. And I don't really usually do specific session zeros, but I do, like I have Discord channels where we talk about stuff before the game. So sort of like an ongoing session zero. Um, but also I try to make sure that people that are new to my game sort of know the way I run the game. Like I'm as honest as possible about how
Mm-hmm.
I will run the game because I don't want them to have a bad experience. I'd rather somebody come to my page, see my page and see it says like, oh, you like, this much combat. Well, I like either more or less combat. So maybe I don't want to get them because they're not going to fit with me.
Yeah.
And I would rather have them go to some other GM that, is better for them than to come to me and to not like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest thing is kind of like be upfront on your pro GMing page, and know your own strengths and weaknesses for running games. And then the other thing I would say is like run games in public. Like the thing that I think made me the best GM, um, as quick as possible was running games in public. Because when you run games for groups that you don't know, you have to be able to sort of like respond to whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best way to do it. You just get so many different player types. You always have to be figuring something out.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the comment basically, saying know your style. Everyone's GMing is different. Some people love heavy combat. Some people it's heavy role play, and that goes for GMs and players. So
Right.
it's really important to know what your style is and advertise for that, because if you are big into role play, you get a player in there that only cares about rolling dice and hitting things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work out. It's not going to be a good time for either of you.
Yeah, I really like. There's a story that Sean Merwin tells about how he was running games in public, and this group, like they were a whole group together,
Mm-hmm.
and so they told him, they're like, "We don't want any story. We just want you to set up a battle map, and we're gonna do the fight." Like that's literally all they wanted. So they
Wow.
just went
Okay.
through the adventure and did the fights. Like
Have they
okay, if that's how they want to play,
considered Hero Quest?
right, yeah, totally. I just thought that was hilarious.
That's pretty funny. And that's what some people like.
Sure, totally. There's a question here, or not a question, but a comment from Drake Takes that says they keep DM burnout away by making sure they have ample supply of player time, and I don't like playing. Not that I like dislike it, but I would much rather.
That's
be
really interesting
a game
to me,
master.
actually.
And I think it is because like my ADHD just doesn't allow me to like want to be off. Like I want to be constantly involved with what's going on. So if I'm sitting there to game, I kind of get bored,
Yeah.
and then I'm the jerk that starts looking at my phone. And so I just would rather not play. That being said, if there's a GM that like I really want to see how they run games, I will definitely play in games in that case to kind of really see how they run a game. Another really cool thing to do is like, especially for Adventures Link stuff, like if you are running one adventure a bunch of times, play it with another GM to see how they run the adventure.
Dex is gonna be totally different.
You run it, they might have different ways or see different things in the adventure that you completely missed, and you're like, oh, I can now add that to my adventure. So that's kind of what I do, is just really to steal from other GM.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What was there's a quote that's like that, where it's like, the quote is like, steal from everywhere. Get your creative stuff from everything in your life.
Yep, 100%.
And I can't remember the exact, but it's like, and it sounds bad when you say it, but like that is absolutely like true.
Yeah, and you know, when you change sort of the details of something, people don't usually realize what you're stealing from anyway. Like, you know, you could kind of mostly, like, maybe the really big stories, if there are a lot of the same exact details, like if you try to do Star Wars, you know, and had someone be their sister and blah, blah, like all that stuff.
Yeah,
someone would probably spot that.
It's called the book Aragon,
right?
Which is just A New Hope.
Yeah, totally. So there's a lot of instances of that, but most players will not pick that up, and especially if you're like, you know, bringing them into the story, like, why is your character there? Your character's involved in this story, and then, like, you know, they're only seeing it from their perspective, so they won't see the larger sort of story necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important though to take from all sources. I do really want to get into the D20 cruise, but I got one more, which is about kind of what we've been going on about, which is just GMing in general. Where do you find your greatest sources of inspiration outside of like official or third-party RPG books? Where do you find your inspirations?
Just in the communities. So if you know, I'm looking for Dark Sun inspiration, I just go to all the places people are talking about Dark Sun and listen to what people are saying. I also love going, obviously, to the old books, right? Like sometimes I've read, you know, all the Dark Sun books 20 years ago, and so there's a lot of stuff I forgot. So sometimes I'm just like to, you know, flip through books and kind of get reacquainted, and you see lots of details. So there's that. Podcasts, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and not just gaming podcasts, but just the gamut. I just listen to so many podcasts, and then people are always like, how do you listen to so many podcasts? And I just,
there's a lot of hours in a day.
Well, I listen to them when I'm doing other things, like I'm washing the dishes, I'm mowing the yard, I'm driving somewhere. I just always make sure to be, you know, to have something to listen to.
Yeah. Do you have, we'll start with a gaming podcast. Do you have a favorite gaming podcast?
The one I'm listening to probably most right now is Mastering Dungeons with Sean Merwin and Teos. Yeah, that's probably what I listen to most, but I probably have like 50 on my my app. But let's see what else.
That's fun. I haven't heard of that one yet.
Oh, that's so good. Because both Sean and Teos, you know, they've written for Wizards of the Coast, done a bunch of organized play, and so they always have really interesting insights to kind of everything that's going on. They kind of do like news, and then they kind of do they talk about, you know, whatever subject. I also like Mike Shea's the Lazy Dungeon Master stuff.
Yeah,
I like all his stuff. Thaka with Advantage, I've been liking. It's a new one I started listening to. I really love. So I'm not usually into actual plays, but one that I really, really, really like. If you're a Dark Sun DM or a Dark Sun player, if you like Dark Sun, check out To Tame a Land. I think it is Tame a Land. But Mark Hope has been a longtime Dark Sun fan. I've known him for a long time, and he just runs an amazing game. Like they just ran a level 3 to like 15 or 16 adventure with a lot of the kind of original Dark Sun adventures.
That's cool.
So it's just a really great podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. It's funny that you mentioned that. So as somebody who part of my job is running actual plays, I also don't really like watching or listening to them. I have a hard time with it. There's a handful that I can watch, and I can usually do like one-shot ones. I actually quite like those. But like committing to a whole series is really
It's
hard.
a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. And I agree. I love one shots for like if I'm trying to learn a system,
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of watch a one shot to kind of see how the math works out or how the system runs. But yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. I don't know. I just can't get into them for some reason.
Yeah, like Critical
Kind of
Role, I
like
have a huge respect for the Critical Role people, but I can't watch it.
right.
The
And it's
most I can
like
do is watch their specials when they do like a single
right.
or like a mini series.
So for me, it's like sports. Like I would rather just be playing it rather than watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's move on to that pin we set up. The ultimate paid D&D, which is the D20 cruise that just happened, and I believe there's another one scheduled for next year.
Yeah. So I had heard of gaming cruises before. There's been a couple, over the years. But one of my friends, Jay Africa, posted online that they were looking for actually an organizer. So they'd already gotten all the GMs, but they were looking for a couple of organizers. So I applied, and another friend of mine, Garrett, who was also in Adventures League stuff, he applied and got it. So basically, we were like, for this one, this was like their first D20 cruise. Like they've done like a cosplay and video game cruise,
Yeah.
and then they're also doing as they're calling it, the Battle Barge, like a miniatures game cruise also.
Okay.
And so what ultimately we ended up doing was we were sort of just kind of like making sure people were like where they needed to be because it's basically just like a con on a cruise ship.
It's a con, but everybody is stuck on a ship
Yeah.
for a week. I don't know how long it was actually.
It's 5 days. Yeah.
5 days. Okay, so almost pretty much a week.
And so the hard thing about it was like, we would have disembarkation days. So like we were in Ensenada or we were in Cabo San Lucas. And so like those are like almost a full day or at least a half a day that people want to be off the boat. So that's like less time for gaming and stuff like that.
But days that games can't happen.
Right. So I was saying we were basically just like GM wranglers. Like we told the GMs where to be, we told the players where to be, an initial setup. This was much easier than sort of a regular con because they had the same GM, same players the whole time. So like we kind of set things up at the beginning and then that was it.
So I was going to ask, like, how was this? Was this because it sounds like it would be more difficult to organize than a con? Because a con on a boat,
right? Yeah. So I think it was in some ways, and it was harder in some ways and easier in the other. For being hard, like you said, a con on a boat. So, but the thing is, the event cruises guys, Drew and them, they've done this, several times again for their GakuCon and things like that. So they like already had all the equipment, like they already have these huge totes filled with everything they needed. And so like they already knew what they were doing. So that part was easier. The hard part was kind of organizing things and figuring out when people wanted to do things. And since this was our first time, it wasn't difficult, but now we're like, oh, now we know what we're going to do for next year, to kind of make it easier. And so the way they kind of did it in general was you had one GM and that GM ran a story, over 3 sessions is what most of them had. But then there's, so the GMs ran 2 sessions a day. But then there's time when you have off. So we just set up some other games. Like I ran Lords of Waterdeep, the board game, several times for several people that had never played it. And so there was like a board game library where you could do that. A lot of people just like did one shot adventures. They just ran it, stuff like that. So there was a lot of that, which was super cool. But most of the time I was kind of hanging out, and we had like a DM library where we had like basically all the D&D books. Plus we had a bunch of terrain, and we had like those big map packs or map books where you just like open them up and there's maps in there. DMs loved those because like a lot of them, didn't want to bring a bunch of stuff on.
Well, yeah.
On the boat.
Who wants to pack like their entire collection of minis?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing we didn't have enough of. We just ended up using like we had these like token tubes that had these little tokens.
Yeah,
we kind of used that, but I think next time we're definitely gonna have to get some more minis.
Like, but honestly, I love minis, but those little like Pog style tokens are so useful.
Yeah, they were really cool, except for like one guy set up like an amazing thing that he had from all the terrain that we had, and so he set up some amazing fights. But then all he had was the pogs, and so that was kind of like, yeah, like we really need miniatures for next time. But those books were probably the best thing. Like GMs would just love, those books with all the maps in them. And so
get WizKids to sponsor it and just give you a bunch of
minis. That's something we'll be talking about. But the big thing that we ended up doing was on the first day, that one GM got seasick. And so Garrett basically just like on the fly had to run a game for their first adventure, their first day, and then I had to come up with something the first night. And of course, like I had prepared, like I knew that this was a possibility. So I was like, oh, I'll just bring some Dark Sun stuff. So I brought Dark Sun miniatures, and I was like, we'll just play Dark Sun. Well, I hear that group already had made up Eberron characters. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I got to run an Eberron thing. And so I just went at the DM's Guild, grabbed one of the adventures that I had run for people in an Eberron game, and just ran that for them. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah. Bill Murphy says, or lots of computers to run Fantasy Grounds.
I would. I didn't use Fantasy Grounds. Like I had it because I had my laptop, and so I thought about it. And like if I would have already had everything set up, I totally would have done that, because I've run games in person with Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah,
I think it's one of those things that people forget that you can do. And since Fantasy Grounds is entirely downloaded onto your machine, you don't need the internet. To run a game. You don't even technically need the internet to, like, if everybody was connecting locally either.
Yeah, you could do that.
So
yeah, it was really interesting because a lot of people had characters like on D&D Beyond and stuff like that. And while the GMs and us organizers, like we had internet access, it was like $25 a day.
Yeah, it's expensive.
To have internet there while you're
cruise ship internet is crazy.
But I think a lot of people were either paying it or they had somehow, otherwise on their tablets and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so sad though, to get there and then forget.
Right.
That all of your characters are loaded onto D&D Beyond, and now you can't.
Yeah, so what we ended up letting people like get on someone's Wi-Fi and then like download the PDF, and we put it in the Discord, and then we printed it for them. So we did that a bunch.
Yeah,
that'll be another thing though. Before in the run up, we'll be like, email us your characters, and we'll print them out for you.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have physical character sheets.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's a question of was it Royal Caribbean, and
yeah, it was Royal Caribbean. We are on the Navigator to the Seas. It was their first attempt at doing the D20 cruise, and the first West Coast one. They've done these like on the East Coast. So next year it is in the Caribbean, and so I'm stoked to go do that.
Yeah.
Because like I've been to like Ensenada and Mexico around here. I mean, I'm like from Arizona, so it's all right there. But I've never been to sort of like the southeast kind of coast of Mexico, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. It sounds like a fun time. It's one of those things. It's probably too expensive for me to join in, but it's one of those things that I would absolutely be interested in.
Yeah, exactly. Like most cons I've been to or things I've done like this are too much for me, but I'm really excited to be able to do them. One of the things that they had every night that I just thought was amazing, like was like you had like really nice dinner every night. And since we were all sort of together on the cruise, like we were all seated together. So that was cool. We also had like special events where like we rented out one of the little like lounges, and we had a couple people like sing kind of these D&D songs.
That's cool.
A couple of the GMs, and then one of the GMs plays like speed metal video game tracks. All right. And so he did some of that, which was pretty cool. Like that was so we had sort of like a bunch of kind of geeky stuff to do other than just gaming. Cool.
That's good. You got 5 whole days, all day to fill.
Yep.
I guess minus the time people are in ports, but not everyone. I'm sure not everyone left, I'm sure there was still some stuff going on.
Yep, for sure. Mm-hmm.
All right, and we're getting close to the end of our time, but let's just because we kind of mentioned it when we started talking about writing, so let's steer us right back over there, and that was that mini Dungeon Tome 2
All right,
for
so
AAW that you did some on.
yeah, so I'm actually not writing on any of this, but I'm just kind of helping with
Working with them.
yeah, with marketing stuff and
Mm-hmm.
ads basically. But you know, they've got, I think, Mini Dungeon Tome 1 and a bunch of their other stuff is on Fantasy Grounds, and so
Mm-hmm.
Mini Dungeon Tome 2 has over 100 kind of literally mini dungeons. They're usually kind of 2-page spread, a quarter of which is like a map that uh that Justin draw as, I think he draw all of them. And they vary from, kind of first 20th level. So
Yeah.
they're, if you just want something to run real quick on any night of the week, you could definitely pick that up, read 2 pages, and you're sort of ready to go.
Yeah, I think we've got a really good relationship with the folks over at AAW. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah, I believe most of their stuff gets ported over to Fantasy Ground. I'm probably gonna need to talk to them about this one here soon. We haven't talked to them about stuff in a while.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let me just do some chat cleanup, make sure there was nothing important we missed.
Mm-hmm.
Going through, doesn't look like too much.
Drake says Planescape's coming up.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the games that I'm running right now is Planescape, although it has turned into like a Planescape Forgotten Realms game, because I kind of like mashed 2 groups together. And so we started that game, though, basically Planescape Torment. I basically went into the Torment game. Well, initially I just grabbed like maps from Planescape Torment that were online, but they were sort of like, some of them were like too small to use in Fantasy Grounds. And so then I figured out how to like get the app to kind of like break into the game to get all the actual maps, so like the huge maps. So I used all those. I used tons of the like NPCs, and basically just a lot of the side adventures and stuff like that were sort of like major points in my campaign. And I think the players just love the kind of callbacks, because a couple of them had played but not like a lot, and so they knew some of the stuff, but also just using all of the maps, I thought just made it so Planescape, like it felt gritty and cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Do you find yourself taking inspiration from like video games, specifically like D&D video games like that?
Yeah, but I'm not a huge gamer. It's it's the
You're a
same
gamer,
thing.
But not a gamer.
Right. I'm not a video gamer. I don't know if it's just my ADHD, but I could never really finish the game, except for like the old D&D games. Like I finished a bunch of those. But
which ones? Yeah, now I'm curious because I love all of those.
Yeah. So let's see, like the old Icewind Dale, Torment. I don't think I actually finished it. I just read. I mean, I've just played it a ton. Like I've played like probably 90% of the game, which is a lot, because there's so many different things you can do in there. And so yeah, I just never. It's the same thing as playing. Like they just don't keep me involved enough. Like I want to do something else, but I can't, because it's a video game. Like that's why I played role-playing game.
Yeah. All right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I know that a while ago I ran a Fallout 2D20 one shot where I basically took the initial plot of Fallout 1. So that's what their quest was. It was go get the water chip from what is it? It's Vault 15. And that's what I did. And as soon as I told them like you're in Vault 13, they're like, oh, we're doing Fallout 1.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So Fallout is another game that I'm writing for actually right now. That was kind of interesting. They were like, pitch us a few adventures. And so I pitched them some adventures, and initially I pitched like basically like Arizona. Like I was going to kind of, even though in Fallout, like New Vegas, like the Legion is all in Arizona, but I was like, well, without having technology, it would be hard to control, a couple of states worth of area.
Mhm.
And so I pitched them that, but they were like, nah, we don't really want something new. We kind of want somewhere, somewhere that people already know that's in one of the locations for the other game. So since I've been playing Fallout New Vegas, to kind of get familiar with some of it,
It's a
that's
great
where I
choice.
pitched.
That's like the best one.
Yeah, it was cool because I never played the original when it originally came out, and so now there's so many mods for it, so many quality of life mods too, that I basically put all that stuff on there, and it's been really fun. But the adventures that I'm writing are in kind of the New Vegas area, so
that's cool.
That'll be cool.
So I had heard they weren't allowed to use that area, so it's really cool that they can kind of branch out there now.
Yeah, yeah.
I know Bethesda's been a little weird with the license of that one, so
yeah. So we'll see how it comes out.
It's good to hear that they're kind of lightening. I think what the agreement that I heard was you can't use anything that we might use in a new Fallout video game. So I guess that confirms we're not getting Fallout New Vegas 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just made it. I try to kind of like put it in the same area, but not really use like any of the NPCs or anything like that. Sort of just general locations and people, like maybe you hear about something, but anybody that's doing actually anything in the game kind of has made up.
Yeah, that's cool though. I really like the Fallout 2D20 system. I've played it. I guess I've really only played it once. No, I played it twice. And it is honestly, it's probably my favorite system outside of D&D. I just don't get to play it very often.
Yeah, it's a good system.
I don't know if you've used the Fantasy Grounds implementation, but it's really good. Oh, you need to. It is the best. In my opinion, I think that Dominic did the best job. I think it is the best rule set implementation in Fantasy Grounds.
Nice. Yeah.
And previously I thought 5e was really well done, especially with when you get some extensions in there. But yeah, I think Fallout has surpassed it.
Nice. Oh, shout out to Jay Africa, who was in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, he's one of the pro GMs, and he's the one that kind of got me the job on the D20 cruise.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I saw he was answering some of the questions that Drake had about it.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are basically at our hour. So, where can we find you around the internet?
So you can find me on Twitter for however long that's still alive at Radu76. You can find me on Mastodon once Twitter dies. I think I'm Radu at tabletop.social. You can find me at athos.org, which is the Dark Sun website that I've run since like 1995. You can find me anywhere people are talking about Dark Sun. I'm usually Radu. And the big 5th edition D&D group on Facebook, Fantasy Grounds group on Facebook. Yeah, lots of places.
All over. You were lurking everywhere.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Well, just to get the Fantasy Grounds plugs out of the way, hey everyone, come back tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Fabled Dice. We're doing a special one-shot with Doug Davison from Smiteworks. So that's going to be fun, running through one of the Keys from the Golden Vault adventures. You can come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for Josh's map and image creation stream. We talked a little bit about map making. If you're more interested in learning about that, come by for that show, and you will learn all you need to know about maps. Thank you for the follow, Tony Say. Thank you so much. And I think we're going to go and drop a raid on somebody if there's anyone around using Fantasy Grounds. Yes, we're going to drop a raid on GM Jenkin. And we will see you all here soon. Oh, and thank you for dropping that Kickstarter link as well. Yeah. In case people are interested in the mini dungeons.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you. You're welcome just about any time. And if you ever do get the itch to be a player, you're welcome on my stream anytime.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've actually played a stream game that was pretty fun.
Yeah, so if you're ever like just got that itch, feel free.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.